a bit loud. Okay. Well, Ngāmihi nui, I'm certainly feeding back to myself, no one else. Ngāmihi nui kia koutou katoa. Welcome everybody to this important event. It's the first of 4 events we're holding over the next month, in which we're really seeking to hear feedback and maybe also allow for informed submissions around 4 key aspects we've put in our draft long-term plan. There's a consultation document. If you haven't seen it or accessed it online, please do. And this is the first of 4. The other ones are a coastal plan, a extension to the library, of course, youth places and spaces, and the Velodrome. And the Velodrome, without a doubt, I think is the biggest and probably the most significant of those 4. First of all, I need to note some apologies. The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Duncan, can't be with us. She's attending a bereavement. We've got Councillor Anderson, who's unavailable today, and Councillor Craig. They've all put in their apologies. I think that's everybody.
The rest of them here?
Sorry?
Are the rest of them here?
There are a number of councillors here. Let's see, Councillor Baker Hogan, Councillor Barron, Councillor Chandler Mackay, Councillor Vincent, and Councillor Reid. So I have to go through and Councillor Young. I saw him walk in as well. Where is he? So I just have to go through the important housekeeping notes. This is a non-smoking venue. If you want to smoke, go outside, go down to Victoria Avenue, keep walking down Victoria Avenue, get onto State Highway 4, walk along State Highway 3, and when you get to get to the Wanahu Bridge, go over there and you can smoke in the Rangitika district. The toilets you've all seen, I won't point them out, that lowers the tone. In the likely event of emergency, a siren will sound continuously. If there's a fire, please hit the nearest call point and assemble in the forecourt of the museum, in front of the museum. If it's an earthquake, don't move. Stay here until the shaking is stopped, and then drop cover and hold. You should be pretty safe in here because the previous decision of council has been to strengthen this and upgrade the earthquake-prone nature of the memorial hall. In a medical emergency, and believe it or not, we had a medical emergency once during a public event, ring 111. And there's a defibrillator downstairs. So I'll just explain what we're doing here. We as council decided it was appropriate to provide anybody here with the opportunity to ask questions of our experts and staff and our governors in order to inform your submission to the long-term plan, our 10-year plan. So this isn't the submission process. I know there are many passionate people here and a lot of you will have opinions one way or the other. It's not for us to hear your opinions today, because as noted over here, there's only, I think, 7 councillors here, not the full quotient, and there's no ability for us councillors to ask you, the public, about your submission and investigate your submission. So a submission for this, it's a very prescribed process. You have to make it. You can do it electronically, you can do it in paper, but you make it through the submission form online and in this document. And then we conduct hearings in May. We listen to your submission, we ask you questions, and then using the input from all the community that we get, we make a decision about prioritisation. It's an age-old process. So today we've got experts and staff who are able to ask questions, answer questions of you all. We also have several stakeholders here, and I've invited three stakeholders to give their position rather than have to give their position during a faux question. So I've invited them to have a couple of minutes to just represent, and I'll tell you who they are. Bob Smith from the Raise the Velodrome Trust, Ron Cheatley from the cycling community, and Ian Murphy, chair of the cycling club, the president of the cycling club, who should be here soon. If he's not here already, he's delayed by the weather. So it's appropriate, I feel, to allow them to express their position as well as ask questions. What today isn't is an argument over what design we should build. Because quite frankly, we've got three options, and the three options are about creating money in the budget. Jazz, I think you should do this. Creating space in our long-term plan. And so the three options are very clear. We have an option which means $16 million will be put in the budget, an option that says $9 million will be put in the budget, and an option that says $200,000 will be put in the budget. I think that's correct. So 16 million, 9 million, and 200,000. I'll just await this. The technology should have been sorted, but we'll await the appropriate slide to come up, please. So it's not an argument about whether the design that Barry Copeland, who I acknowledge is here, I think I saw him come in, his design, or whether a Boone design is built. It's not about that. It's about the space in the budget, the money we've apportioned and that we're rating, and decisions about what design and how best to build things will occur later, but they can't occur without money being apportioned in the budget. So do you all understand that? I want to make this also very clear, that this is not a fait accompli. I've never been involved in even an annual plan, let alone a long-term plan discussion in which this was just rubber stamped and rolled over. Things are always altered because of the response we get from the community. And I can tell you that the decision to prioritise option 2 was not a unanimous decision among councillors. I need to stress that. But I can tell you one thing. Council very rarely, if ever, makes a decision on one-line emails saying, build a velodrome, what's taking you so long? It doesn't make decisions on how loud people shout. It doesn't make decisions on, oh, well, I've got lots of friends who don't want to build a velodrome. It makes submissions on well-informed, well-constructed submissions. It makes decisions on that. That might be empirical evidence. It might be evidence about the use that the velodrome gets from cycling. It might be an overall feeling about prioritisation, whether we should prioritise one project over another project. Because I tell you this now, I don't think anyone I'm looking at in this room does not want to put a roof on the velodrome. It's just at what cost? Would I be right?
Partly.
So it's just, so we're talking about the prioritisation. That's the key decision we have to make. So the last thing I'll say before, I'll just go through what we'll do. I'm going to ask Councillor Baker Hogan, who's the council's sports champion, to detail some of the history of how we've got here in 2021, when it was first built in 1995.
Can I ask a question before you continue?
Yes?
All those options, care stand.
Sorry?
All those options of building a care stand with no poles.
Well, as I've said before, that decision is not part of those options. It's
Very important.
sure, I accept that. we're creating money in the budget. Space in the budget.
It's very important.
You can ask that later, because we have someone's done an independent review, and we have people like Barry Copeland and Glenn Brubner who are here and can answer those things. Jay, okay, quickly. This is not Q&A time, and I'll be very rigid. Okay. Sorry?
I followed up later. The question is, under any of these options, even the current one, who owns the present Velodrome?
The Wellington District Council owns the facility.
Council owns it?
Council.
And is responsible for its upkeep?
Council's own it. So, last thing I'll say. There are a lot of passionate people in this room. I can tell because I've had a couple of one-line emails, and people might be here. And what I don't want this is to become a bona fide. The most important thing is respectful communication. Jay's recently been in America. You'll know what disrespectful communication is like in the political discourse over there.
Sorry, I'm not an expert.
But we don't want that. So please, respectful communication. This is my meeting. This is my annual plan, my long-term plan legislatively. Please make this respectful. And if I ask you to modify your questions, please do that. I don't want to have, I'm sure I won't have to resort to closing the meeting early. Because we have staff members and people who have come here today who haven't the opportunity to defend themselves. I'll say it one more time, respectful communication, because political discourse needs that. So, after we've heard from Councillor Baker Hogan, we'll hear from Jasmine Hessel, who is leading the process of the submissions for the long-term plan, and she'll outline how further to contribute. And then we'll have a Q&A session. Now we have numerous people here. We've got Steve Bramley, who did the independent review. We have Leighton Toy in his last week at council. Where is he, Leighton? Who's the property manager. We have Simon Manville and Claire Williamson, who are the money people. We have, of course, Councillor Baker Hogan and myself and other governors. We've got Glenn Brubner here, and luckily we've also got Barry Copeland here. There are a lot of people who can answer questions that you might have, burning questions. This is not a simple decision for council. It won't be a simple decision for any of you to put in your submission. So again, thank you for weathering, quite literally weathering the journey here. And I will now ask Councillor Baker Hogan to outline some of the history.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you everyone for coming, and thank you Mayor Hamish for holding this forum. It's really, really important to council and our long-term plan that those key projects get some good airtime with our community. I'm sure Jasmine is going to say it when she does with the process, but just following up briefly on what the Mayor said, when it comes to submitting, in fact, I don't know the answer to this one, but you can obviously submit in writing, as he said, and written forms are here. You can submit online. You can possibly submit personally by actually going to the council building and helping someone do that for you. But you can also, your submission, you can elect to speak to it or not. So you don't have to speak to your submission, but it is an excellent idea to speak to your submission. And your submission can be just one sentence, or it can be quite a bit longer. And your submission can be just one sentence or a little bit longer, but the Mayor will control that. But it will be a timeline. But I would encourage you, regardless of what your submission might be, to try and to speak to it, to give that time. It can make quite a difference. So I'm not going to pretend, because there's people here that were involved even earlier in building that this velodrome. So it's just a very brief history, and I'll just go over what I know of that. So owning up to the fact that I did not arrive in Wanganui until 1992, but have not left since and don't intend to. But this quarter mile Cook's Gardens asphalt track was built in the early 1930s. Obviously that was outside the wonderful grass track where Sir Peter Snell obviously broke his world record, the late Sir Peter Snell. The wooden track was designed by Ron Webb and built in 1995, and I do clearly remember that because of my little, because I was actually preparing at that time for my last Olympics, and to see something like that go up was pretty inspiring. There was an expectation was that the Velodrome would have a roof at a future point, and some of you will know a whole lot more about that, but we're just doing this briefly to give so that we can get on with the stuff about and keep informing you and asking questions. So over the years, and particularly stemming from 2005, the various development options have been considered, from roofing the Velodrome only to a multi-purpose event centre with a continually evolving design. Around 2007, the government was becoming increasingly interested in having a roof velodrome in the North Island. And in fact, I specifically remember going to Sport New Zealand, well, formerly Spark, with people like Ron Cheatley and probably Lee Grant, and meeting there. And I really do believe it was Wanganui who obviously had the first wooden velodrome. And I can't give you, but I'm sure Ron can answer it straight away now, or someone else, or Bob, that eventually Invercargill roofed their velodrome, largely funded by the Invercargill Licensing Trust. But that we, I think even before that, we're putting the whole idea that we had the first wooden velodrome, the only one, and the need to roof a velodrome. And so it was around that time, and obviously eventually when Invercargill got theirs, also, no roof velodrome in the North Island where the major population was. But it's around that time at a multi-events, around that 2007, a multi-event centre concept was presented to council. Roof of the Velodrome has previously been very well supported by the community, including some significant positive response. In fact, there were two referendums, 2005 and then 2008 for a Wanganui Velodrome Event Centre. My recollection is that both those referendums, but certainly the 2008 one, had over 70% of those that responded overall supporting roofing the velodrome, and it was clearly number one. So after the International Velodrome Events Centre, multi-event centre momentum was building. In 2010, the government announced a major reshaping and expansion of high-performance sport. In fact, it went from, its motto became New Zealand becoming the winningest country in the world. Interestingly, in the last few years, it's gone from New Zealand being the most active country in the world. So obviously, different governments, different colours, and yes, very valid, I believe. I don't think I'm certainly not against about us being the most active country in the world. I think it's vitally important, but we can have both. We can still have some excellent performers, competitors, and high performance. So after that announcement by the government, it triggered a reduced scope of design of the Wanganui Velodrome Event Centre into the Cycling Centre of Excellence, a roof facility that provided amenities for two other sports, athletics and speed skating. In 2011, Council's Cycling Centre of Excellence bid was put forward. It was a council bid. It had council ratepayer funding behind that. It was a huge piece of work. Randall Mellows actually was a consultant at the time. A variety of these people again, Ron Cheatley, Bob Smith, Lee Grant were all part of that bid. And that bid, there were 7 councils in fact that bidded, and I'll be honest in saying here that Cambridge was actually last off the block, but won the race. And we were unsuccessful in that bid. It was a very, very difficult and disappointing time for the energy that went into it. And I guess some of the questions over how that came, that this council had actually committed over $14 million and at that time a lot of money, obviously still a lot of money. And actually at that time, that bid led by Olympic champion Rob Waddell had no commitment of any council in that region. However, it's very successful, as we know, and it's a UCI Level 1 international covered velodrome facility. In 2013-14, there is talk about another reduced scope of the tension membrane roof was considered. But heading into the 2016 general election, a political visit, I think, by the then Prime Minister John Key. 2016? I clearly John Key being in that room at Cook's Garden, yes, Lee, yes.
It might be a different meeting.
Yeah, it might have been a different one. It led to the... Yeah, I remember that, but I remember also him inside that Cook's Garden as well. So that political visit led to a $6 million election promise, and that was obviously then that was also equalled by the then candidate, Prime Ministerial candidate Jacinda Ardern. I remember that clearly in Majestic Square. There was an indication that the project should cater for more than just cycling and become a regional multi-purpose facility. The Regional Velodrome Development Trust, I guess I can't answer for them exactly when that trust was formed, and that obviously those people had been part of this whole project for many, many years. But I think that it was possibly formally formed about then, and really and drove the project. In 2017, Council was asked for $1 million of capital ratepayer funding for the project, and it approved it, and it's been sitting there in the annual plan, 10-year plan, ever since, and gets rolled over since then. In 2017, over the period 2017 to 2020, project costs for the tension membrane design became to escalate during detailed design stage, and a peer review was undertaken, and then subsequently a feasibility study as well. There's been a number of studies, and there might be a lot of what we hear out there. Why do you need another report? Certainly, Sport New Zealand got involved in what was called a feasibility study. That study actually wasn't accepted. That was questioned and was not quite accepted by council, and hasn't really. It seemed to be very narrow, and I think in the end, Sport New Zealand actually kind of accepted that, and perhaps Mr. Bramley will speak to that a little bit more about the inadequacy, perhaps, of that report. But the influx of information between external and internal parties resulted in a bit of an impasse. There was a project control group formed during this period of the last 3 years or so that I eventually came into and chaired with Bob Smith on. Martin Visser came into that, Leighton Toy and Rosemary Fletcher from Council. And so trying to work together to work through this. But I think that influx of information between the external and internal parties kind of resulted in Council, not just me, not just the Mayor, but Council deciding that it needed a final independent review. And that is what the Bramley report as such was received by Council and made public about 9th of February last year. I think just to go through the review process that Council has taken. I'll just go back a fraction to say during the general election with COVID-19 and shovel-ready projects, the Council willingly put forward a shovel-ready project for this, and supported Martin Visser in particular to do a lot of work there with Bob and Lee, and I guess myself involved there, and gave it a very good chance, did everything we could to try and get some money over the line in regard to shovel ready, but we got through the first round, but we got no further than that. So no funding has become forthcoming by any government at this stage. So going into the review process very quickly, Yes, there was a project control group, but then once council decided it needed to get a final independent review and that this is a ratepayer facility, this facility is owned by the ratepayer and council are the custodians of that. A Velodrome review working group was established with the mayor and a few councillors, including myself, that to work through all the information, what we've got and what we need. After an expression of interest process that was also delayed through COVID lockdown, we appointed Steve Bramley from his company. I haven't got it at the top of my head, but he could say that too. And Mr. Bramley reviewed the historical documentation and held discussions with key stakeholders, including the cycling community and the Regional Velodrome Development Trust, and spent quite a bit of, I certainly spent some good time with that trust, understanding your information and going back and forward. And presented, I guess, possibly a couple of draft reports leading on to his final report. At some stage, Mr. Bramley needed to engage to get some engineering or design capability into that, because he had allowed his skill set, but not the full skill set. So Boone engineers or architects or whatever were engaged by him to us, or by engage with council's obviously council's knowledge to undertake design and cost analysis. 3 workshops were held. One of these included the key stakeholders and their supporting design consortium, and one included this, and another one where Bob Smith, when we were looking at an alternative design, Bob was involved in that. And those reports were released in the public arena on the 9th of February 2021. Okay, and now obviously council's worked through looking at its long-term plan, has had a lot of discussions, understanding and trying to come up with what options it believes needs to be considered. You could add the brief discussions could be around, well, why is the track only not in there? And I think that is described or answered in the documents, but you could ask those questions now. So I think that's where the council just released its long-term plan last week, and this is the first key meeting.
Thanks, Councillor Baker. I really appreciate your detailing all the history. I know there might be some dates and things that were slightly askew, and I'm sure that very wet day up at Cook's Gardens it was Bill English who announced it, but it was, wasn't it? But I know John Key visited, as well as Jonathan Coleman. So the RVDT must have been going on at least since about 2014-15, would be my thought. And I want to acknowledge all the people who have done a lot of work in advocating and pushing for the project and fundraising as well. We should never ever dismiss the volunteer hours a lot of people have put in. Now, I wanted to say 2 or 3 quick things. First of all, is it hot in here?
Yes, sir.
Got a yes. Is there any way to deal with the air conditioning? Someone will. Secondly, I'm not going to be here at 7:15. I'm walking out the door at 7:14 because I've got something else to go to tonight, and so that's. We don't want to fetter your questions, but maybe, Mr. Murphy, what we want to do is allow for as many questions, but then after maybe 6:30, 6:45, we can progress and have individual questions in order for you to ask the questions of the appropriate people to inform your submission. And I do need to just briefly go through the 3 options that are in the long-term plan. Option 1, which is a decommissioning of the track at a cost of $200,000. Now, this is not the complete demolition of all the facility. It really is the decommissioning of the track, because again, similar to creating space in the budget, we have made no decisions around what we could do. That's for a later decision if that becomes the preference. Second is the council's preferred option, which is a roofed velodrome. The cost to build is estimated at 20 million. The council's contribution would be 9 million. I think there's general acceptance that we wouldn't be doing this without external money. And there's the overall impact. And the multi-purpose velodrome and event centre, a cost of 36 million, council funding up to 16.4 million. And that comprises cycling, potential for speed skating, I believe, and also creating a space which can host concerts and other events. Again, the councillors and some of the stakeholders have really well canvassed these options, or some of these options, in questions and workshops. So this is the opportunity for you to have the same information that we had in prioritising option 2, but even just putting option 3 and 1 as the only other options. That's why there's no track-only option. So with that, I'll ask Jasmine to tell you about the process.
Kia ora everybody. Yeah, I'll be really quick. So I just really have been running a broader long-term plan process, and key thing for me at the moment is trying to extract community views across the whole long-term plan. So we're out and about over the next couple of weeks talking to people at multiple places, and really keen for you to share the word around your networks, trying to get people aware of this project and also get their submissions into us as well. So there's a lot of content in our consultation document that's really important. Velodrome obviously is a big deal, and I'm pleased to see so many people here tonight. I'm a little bit surprised, but I'm pleased. So thank you for your time. Yeah, so just sharing that amongst your networks will be really appreciated. So closing dates for submissions is the 30th of April, and we've got 5 o'clock on that, and you can submit through the Whanganui District Council website, which is probably the easiest. We've got some hard copies out in the foyer if you want to do it tonight. A box, you can put them in, you can do it straight away. And we have dates set for hearings the 12th and 13th of May. So if you do want to come along and speak to your submission, those are the dates that will be happening. And just for your information, the whole set of submissions that come into us are presented to the elected members before they make their decisions. So they see the whole lot of material. Every submission is read, and it's quite a thorough process. So I really encourage you to put one of those forward to us, please. Thank you.
I think last year we had a record number of submissions just for an annual plan. I think it was 190. So let's see if we can get more than 190 this year. So now I'd like to invite 3 people to just spend a couple of minutes detailing the position of their group, or so we've got Bob Smith from the RVDT. We've got Ron Sheetley on behalf of the Cycling Community of Whanganui, and Ian Murphy. I hope this doesn't come to a surprise. Where are you, Ian? Ian's here. Just to give the opportunity for a couple of minutes to the crowd on your position as president of the cycling club. So Bob Smith from the RVDT.
Thank you, Mayor Hamish, and it did come as a bit of a surprise to me when you buttonholed me outside the door and said, would you like to speak? But I'm very pleased to take this opportunity, and it's great to see so many people here tonight. The velodrome we have is a world-class facility, and we need to recognise that. Philip has said it was designed by Ron Webb. Ron was an Australian track cyclist who took up track design. He immigrated to Britain, and he designed the Manchester Velodrome in 1993, and for the Manchester Velodrome he started experimenting with these long sweeping transition curves that we're familiar with today in velodromes. Prior to that, velodromes are just long straights and tight bends. And Ron started experimenting with these long sweeping curves for the Manchester Velodrome, and he perfected that in Wanganui for the Wanganui design. And the Wanganui design is a design that he was very, very proud of. And it became the forerunner of the modern velodromes around the world, such as Sydney and London, were all designed to the same design geometry as the Wanganui Velodrome. At the time, we were the envy of cities around the world. We had overseas visitors who were envious of us. And today we're the envy of cities in New Zealand, Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch would love to have a velodrome, an international standard velodrome such as we have. So to see it decommissioned is just not an option for us. It's just not an option. I became involved I've been working on this since 2000. This is actually my fourth attempt to get the roof over the velodrome. I see it as an economic development opportunity, not just roofing the velodrome for a few cyclists to use on a club weekend, on a club day. It is an economic development opportunity. The interior space inside the velodrome itself is 2/3 the size of a rugby field. Or to put it another way, or to give you another comparison, it's more than twice the size of the Memorial Hall forecourt. So we've got a huge space there which is underutilised. And we've got a world-class track which is underutilised because as soon as it gets wet, it cannot be used, it becomes unsafe. And even when we get a heavy dew, the cyclists can't use it. So it's completely underutilised at the moment. And during winter, the western end remains wet all year. So we're just not utilising this world-class facility as much as we should. So as I say, this is my fourth attempt. The Regional Velodrome Development Trust was established in 2015 when Lee came to me, Lee Grant, who was chair of the Wanganui Events Trust, said, look, this track is deteriorating. We had a maintenance engineer do an inspection of it. He said it's probably got 3 or 4 years, this was in 2015, it's probably got 3 or 4 years to go. So Lee said we've got to protect the asset, so we looked at the cost of just roofing it, just putting a hat on it. No sides, just a roof that extended across the track and far enough to protect it. And then we started looking for funds, and our funders said to us, this has got to be more than just for cyclists, it's got to be multi-purpose. And our local authority councillors and officials and our central government officials said this has got to be multi-purpose and it's got to be regional. So to make it regional, the regional hub became an option. And Cycling New Zealand said to us, if you put a roof over the Velodrome, we will bring we will establish a regional hub in Wanganui. So it became a regional facility. We also learned that inline skating is a very strongly developing sport in Wanganui, and it's a very strong sport in Palmerston North. And Palmerston North Club said to us, we will use that facility if you could put an inline skating track inside it. So again, it became a regional facility. And we looked at what else we could put inside, use the interior space for. We decided that we didn't want to take anything away from any other sporting body in Wanganui. So we eliminated court sports completely from the use. And we came up with a list that's probably 30 or 34 items long of activities that could take place inside the velodrome, inside that space. But that space is actually, because it's open to the atmosphere, it's not level, it's sloped. So that would have to be levelled. So there's more than just roofing it. Ron quickly said to me, you've got to enclose it because of the wind in Wanganui. If we've got the howling westerly blowing through there, it won't be useful. You're going to shut me up soon, aren't you? So we had to enclose it. It then transpired that the track was deteriorating to the point where we had to replace it, so we had to add in the track replacement to it. And to make it a multi-purpose facility, we've got to have facilities. At the moment, there's no toilets for the cyclists to use. So when there's a meeting on there, if they want to use the toilet, they have to cross the track and go into the Snell Pavilion. So we want to provide toilets. So there's a number of add-on features that needed to be included in the design to make it a multi-purpose facility. So option 2 here is basically putting a roof over it, enclosing it, and renewing the track, but doing nothing else. So it won't become a multi-purpose facility. There might be some uses you could put it to, but we'll still have the sloping interior. We believe there's an option between 2 and 3. Option 3 is the grandiose option where we turn it into a full-blown multi-purpose event centre with seats, demolish the Snell Pavilion and rebuild it, and really go to town on it. But there is an intermediate option between 2 and 3, and that's what the RBTD will be submitting on, that there's an option of about 25 million, which will become a multi-purpose facility, but not to the point where we would be able to hold concerts. So I think that's our position. Thank you for the opportunity.
I fitted a lot into 2 minutes, didn't I? I may not be as flexible with others, but Ron, if you can come and hold on.
I'm going to be struggling to get in 2 minutes too, so I'll talk pretty fast. But basically just want to say right from the start that cycling in Wanganui has always been a very, very prominent sport. First cycle racing started here on a Velodrome in 1876, and the Athletic and Cycling Club was formed the year after in 1877. The first New Zealand Championship happened in the year 1878. It was a 5-mile race. So basically we have had a velodrome in Wanganui ever since 1876 has been a velodrome here. At the moment we pretty much haven't got one. So but what I want to also say is the fact that it's been a really, really prominent area of New Zealand for producing really good cyclists. Like from the 50s right through to the end of last century, right up to 2000, Wanganui was looked upon as the place in New Zealand for cycling. If you wanted to be good, you go to Wanganui. That's where they have the racing, that's where they have the coaches, that's where they have the facilities. That was on the old track in those days, then the new track. And we produced so many champions, not just in school level or even junior level, even an elite level. I counted out really quickly the other day, we had 40 plus elite titles in recent years. That's at the very, very top of the ladder. And that come from Wanganui, and most of it come from the Velodrome. Of course, we've run so many major events here in cycling, not just national championships, but Oceania Championship. We were the first to instigate the Oceania Regional Championships, Junior World Championships, International Night of the Stars. All big promotions have all happened here in Wanganui. And along with the club, which has been the Road Cycling Club and now the Track Club, which started in 1928. So the history here of cycling is enormous. And up until when the first velodrome was built in Invercargill, then Cambridge, Wanganui was the place to be. We need to get back to that. That's what I'm trying to say. We want to get back to that. My view is that we want to support a final budgeted design being agreed to that is fit for purpose. Enables national, regional cycling events, enables the use by other sports such as, well, I've got a list here, I'll run through those in a minute, other events and activities. It leaves the door open for further options and staging as required. Confirm that the intention is not to take away other activities from other sporting venues in Whanganui, which has already been alluded to. Just to tell you, because people ask all the time, is what are you going to do in there apart from cycling? Well, I'll run through this quickly. This is just some examples. Search and rescue drills, large weddings, kapa haka, bike polo, velo ball, ice skating. Went to the Tasmanian Velodrome once, they had Disney on ice. Food and wine festivals, big ones, big food and wine festivals, motor shows, indoor rugby schools, cricket nets, exhibition tennis, special courts set up just for temporary. CrossFit Nationals. The CrossFit Nationals are held every year in the Cambridge Velodrome. Halberg programs. I've talked to the Halberg people. This facility was ideal for what they want to do in this region. There's things like model car racing, music festivals. Don't need to talk about concerts. Concerts is not a word that I like. I'm talking about just music, lower gigs. As far as cycling goes, it's just not about elite. It's not about national. It's not about that type of cycling totally. We're talking about ACC, stroke and surgery rehab, senior citizen exercise programs, corporate programs, schools. There's 40 schools operate out of Cambridge Velodrome, 40. Trike program, which is big in Cambridge as well. The Halberg programs. What's coming on board overseas is the sight impaired programs. Arthritis. Another organisation that's keen to have a facility like this. All operating in a safe environment in all weathers, all year round, day and night. That's what we're trying to do. So that just gives you an example quickly of what can be done there apart from cycling. Thanks, Hamish.
I want to remove one of those activities because cricket, Whanganui has raised enough money to put cricket nets in the stadium, in the Jubilee Stadium. So scratch that one. But I think it's magnificent. 100,000 of cricket Whanganui produced.
You're not supposed to critique. Stick to the program.
I'm talking about cricket and I'm just acknowledging that. I'm just saying that cricket. Sorry, I am allowed to talk and I will. So Ron and Bob both said they didn't want to take away from other sports and other sports activities. Cricket has a net now, and they've done a hell of a lot of volunteer work to raise 100,000 to put in the Jubilee Stadium, and that should be celebrated. Right? Last but by no means least, I'd like to invite Ian Murphy up to speak and give your position as president of the cycling club.
Thanks, Hamish. Apologies for lateness. I drowned out there. I'm going to change my clothes if I'm brutally honest with you. So apologies for lateness firstly, and then secondly, apologies on behalf of the cycling club for perhaps not being as prominent as we should have been for some time prior to even tonight. We have, for those who don't know, Ian Murphy's my name. I'm a sports and exercise medicine doctor when I'm not president of the cycling club. I've never ridden a bike in a race in my life, but I have followed some children through a whole lot of activities and see enormous benefit in exercise and sport and recreation opportunities in our community, and that's probably what ultimately drags me here tonight, as my main cyclist has now left town. And there might be a bit of a story in that around this. Whanganui Cycling Whanganui has spent probably the last year getting its act into gear. Ron has outlined the fine history that the club has got, and it does indeed have that. It's produced all manner of, successful cyclists in many shapes and forms. The world is changing though, and we need to be a little bit more to a few more people. We are recognising that it is no longer simply around your members. We currently have about 70 members, for those who are not aware, but we have a responsibility to promote activity around cycling in our community, even if you are not a member of our club. And that is where we are starting to come from, and this velodrome, we believe, is an important part of that. I happened to, just as a complete aside, be up in Karapiro for a certain rowing event last weekend and ended up in a function at the Velodrome on a Friday night up there. And there were 30 or 40 kids just burring around that Velodrome, having fun basically. There was no big national event on, there was no titles up, there was nothing. There were kids in there on a Friday night smashing around the Velodrome. And that is the sort of thing that we are looking to capture in our community. We have examples from both Dunedin, from Invercargill and from Hamilton, from Cambridge, to show that this really does get kids up and going. They love cool things, and a velodrome is a cool thing. As I say, we've been busy with a strategic plan to get more participation and to get more youth up and going, and an important part of that is to have an activity for them to use through the velodrome, and it just simply won't happen without a roof on it. I don't know if we've talked about the state of the velodrome at present before I arrived here tonight, but it's fair to say it's grim. It was about as grim as my clothing an hour ago. So that's something that we need to be well aware of. We are confident that we are going to be the major user of this facility, and we have to front up and be prepared to do that. To be very clear, our position is that we support a roof going on this, which is option 2. Okay, I appreciate there's a lot more that can and could be done around the edges of that, but we need a roof on this for our community. We need it for 2 reasons. We need it for our local people to participate in activity that doesn't rely on weather, and it allows us to do a lot of things inside it. There was a question some time ago through the various workshops, what else are you going to use in here? I don't have the answers for that on the cycling club, but what I can tell you is that everywhere I've been, including 2 velodromes in 2 ends of the country, innovation happens. They put courts in there of different shapes and sizes, everything wrong. These things happen, but you've got to create the facility for people to do that. So we support a roof going on. What are we prepared to do? Don't stand up just yet, Hamish. See what are we prepared to do? Everyone's talked around the fact that there's a Snell Pavilion there. Now, just to be very clear, the Wanganui Cycling Club owns the Snell Pavilion. Okay, and my job, once I leave here tonight and once you all submit in support of a roof going on this velodrome, and Hamish ticks the box, is to convince a whole group of members over many, many years who put a lot of toil into that club and own those club rooms, that they need to gift those to this city as part of this facility. Okay, that is my job. And I'll take that job on because I believe it is worth it for the value that this community will get out of the Wanganui Cycling Club gifting that. The other thing I suspect I'm going to have to do is go to Wellington, remember how to tie a tie and go to Wellington and try and get $11 million more, I think it is. But anyway, that's for another day. The other thing we're committing to doing, and I think it's in the notes that you've probably spoken about already, that we have to run this. Okay? One of the important points around this is this can't be a drag on the ratepayer forever and a day for the whole kit and caboodle. And the Wanganui Cycling Club, as I say, has its acting gear, so we can get on and run this facility and help the ratepayer. So that's our position, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thanks for the opportunity.
Did notice there's such interest, there's no more of these, so anyone with a spare one, or any, Jazz, if you've got any more, we'll put them down here. Now, I had a request for another person to speak. I'm not going to accept that request because we've heard from key stakeholders. I do want to just say about Ian, and it was a public meeting in which Wanganui Rugby, and I see Jeff Phillips there, stating his support for the velodrome as a potential training facility, for roofing the velodrome as a potential training facility, so I just want to acknowledge that. And you've already heard, and I saw Gary here before from speed skating, you've heard that that's a potential use for that as well. So those people are available, if you're available for questions, if they are pertinent to you guys. I want to also say, we've heard some speeches. We don't really, it's not necessarily a useful thing to hear for you to use all your ammunition tonight in a speech. I would much rather hear your questions in order to inform your submissions and keep your powder dry for when you're speaking in public at the submissions. It's publicly broadcast. We normally have a reasonably big gallery. Admittedly, it can range over 2 days, but my utter preference is for you to be asking questions. And so, if somebody...
Could I just ask one question?
Sure.
You've ticked your preferred option.
Yes, the council's...
It's a bit wrong that we do that with a submission.
No, we actually have to.
Oh, you do.
So,
So number 3 is not closed, is it? It's not closed off. We can still go for number 3.
oh, no, absolutely. Sorry, Joe, you probably missed it at the very beginning. When I said these are the 3 options, other options have been, aren't being considered. And one of them is a track only. Replace the track and leave it open. Yeah. So, but these are the 3 options that we want your feedback on. And actually, I'll get an answer to your question. It will be the very first.
These are council options, aren't they? These 3 options come from the council?
Well, of course, because the council owns it and we're putting together the...
So what about the 4th option from the Velodrome Trust?
So the process was fairly simple in that the options were put to us and that wasn't one of the options presented as a possibility. That doesn't mean it's not a possibility. It just means that at the time we put together the consultation document, it was not mentioned to council at all.
Why didn't the council go to that group at the time?
Sorry?
Why didn't the council go to that group at the time?
I can't see you speaking. Oh, I get it, Pat. Because we had already gone to the group.
You just said you didn't.
No, I said we'd already gone to the group about, we went through 3 workshops, including the RBDT. And their presentation was around the $36 million one. Admittedly, there was an argument, maybe $2 or $3 million either way because of exigencies of a major project, infrastructure costs and trimmings you could do. So, before I take any more questions, and I can see hands proliferating. We have a microphone, and Kelly will give it out on my instructions. And Kelly will also, and she's strong. I tell you, I should take it off you. And if you still keep holding on, I will then start singing the national anthem really loudly. All right? So you don't want that. I just need to introduce and acknowledge people who are here, available to answer questions. I've already talked, and Ian, thank you for offering to answer any questions. Bob and Ron, if you'd be available as well. Gary from Speed Skating and Jeff Phillips from Rugby. Here from, sorry?
There's a lot of people who have come here tonight to ask questions to the council's annual session. They're not going to get an opportunity now.
Of course they are, that's why we're here.
Sorry?
That's why we're here. So let me introduce the people who are here and available to ask.
Sorry, I've got a bit of child.
Oh, okay, cheers. We've got Steve Bramley, and who, and I'll just read a little bit of a biography. A lead independent consultant for the Velodrome Review, extensive improvement, successful track record in strategic leadership, leisure planning and business facility. Oh, sorry, he's director of SGL Funding Limited. He's worked closely with 35 local authorities in New Zealand, Australia. Some examples are the TSB Hub in Hawara, the Rotorua Energy Events Centre, and the Caroline Bay Aquatic Centre in Timaru. And considerable events experience with the Ellerslie Flower Show and the Auckland Marathon. And the author of the final report that was presented to us. We've also got, obviously, Councillor Baker Hogan, myself, as I said earlier. Councillor Baker Hogan, myself, and 5 other councillors are all here, so I did say that earlier. We've got Leighton Toy, our property manager. We have Claire Williamson and Simon Manville, who are our finance guys. And we have Glenn Krebner from Boom Team Architects. And we've also got Barry Copeland here. Where are you, Barry? Oh, okay. Well, you just came here for interest. But would you be available for question answering any questions? questions come to you. Right. So let's do this in an orderly fashion. I'll try and be first five. If it's something the governance, the councils should answer, I'm here, as is Philippa, and then if any of the councils want to contribute, they can put their hands up and we'll pass to you. If it's finance, it'll go to the finance people. If it's about the proposed boom design, even though we're not really arguing about the design here, but your question about struts, poles, is totally relevant, and that will be asked of Glenn. If it's about the independent review, if it's about the ability to host events and the like, Steve is here. All sorted? Let's begin. So, first question up there, and please identify yourself as you.
A member of the Wilderness Site I'd actually like to ask.
Use a microphone, otherwise. And one last thing about microphones.
I'm familiar with them.
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask a question through you to Bob and Lee. You mentioned before that the reason that one of the proposals didn't get up there wasn't one of them that was presented to you. So Bob and Lee, have you been happy that you have received the attention from the council that you feel the trust deserves? Do you feel that you have had a fair hearing so that your proposals have become part of council's consideration?
Bob.
We've never had enough time to present our proposal.
Bob, like a banana, not an ice cream.
Yeah, banana. Yeah. We're very short of bananas at the moment. No, we would say no. The answer is no. We were invited to a workshop where we presented 5 options, and I think that it didn't go particularly well for us at that particular workshop. I think one of the things that we were debating then was the cost, and particularly the capital cost of 36 million for the top option. But we actually presented 5 options, one which do nothing, which is demolished, and one which was a track only, but we had 3 other options, and one of them was the intermediate option that I mentioned.
I don't want to critique that, Bob, but you did express a preference at that workshop for the 36, for the big option, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't 36 million.
Oh, okay, but the big option. Yeah, for the big option, yeah. I saw one over here. No, Jay, you did have your hand up earlier. Microphone, Jay.
I like a small question, it's just sort of a housekeeping.
Yeah, sure. Can you point the microphone at your mouth, Jay?
Point it at my...
Yeah, beautiful.
Okay. My name is Jay Cuton, and the question I have, this is a 10-year plan.
Yes.
When you talk about the effect on rates.
Yes.
You know, there's something a little bothersome. We got 42,000 a year, and the cost is 200,000 now. 42,000 a year times 10 is still 400.
I know, it'd be, because it's actually, well, I'll ask Simon to answer that. Can you turn the microphone off while I'm keeping on?
That particular option is a 5-year repayment, so it's basically we loan fund it and pay it back over 5 years, whereas the other 2 are repaid over 25 years.
So, okay, Ross. Sorry, I cannot see people, so please identify yourself. It's quite surprisingly bright up here. I can see people in the front rows.
Hamish, this has been a tough journey for all people on all sides of this. I'd like to congratulate you for being the mayor who said we're going to get a decision one way or the other, and this has been nearly 25 years, so well done for making that commitment. I thank you for that. My question is one that I need to be educated on. Normally a development project or opportunities for development economic projects would go for Wonga Partners. some time ago you stated this is a matter for council. I just want to be educated as to why it didn't go to Whanganui and Partners as one of the biggest economic opportunities potentially that we could have, and why it went specifically to yourself, even though you've drawn a line in the sand.
It's council's facility, it's a property that we own. The economic development aspect is where we'd seek advice from Whanganui and Partners. It's not their project. It has to be ours, it's our facility. Whanganui and Partners offer advice. They may even offer funds because they do have a budget. It's not extensive, but nevertheless. So Whanganui and Partners are the economic development advisors for council, as well as the other things they do. I think that's the Leighton, I can't see. Would that be a fair reflection?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. But a good question. Sorry, and the question about the polls. So I think the best, a design presented by Boone has been suggested as a possibility for the 20 million design, the $20 million band, and I think Glenn would be the best to answer that. Glenn Brebner.
Thanks, Hamish. So the question that we were asked is really what was the most affordable way that we thought that we could actually put the roof over the velodrome. And looking at that, the simple answer in terms of a steel span structure was to actually drop some supporting poles into the infield area. So it's different than the large span of the CAA design. But that 4-pole structure still allows for Category 2 UCI category. So, which is the same as in the carbon.
That's the international cycling. Is that what?
Mike Johnston, I've got a question for you, Ron. Will those poles have any impact for like international events?
Sorry, I can't see who's speaking. Oh, sorry, mate.
Mike Johnston.
Obviously, the preferred option, of course, is to have it pole-free naturally for a number of reasons. But as far as cycling goes, the biggest thing we have to avoid is the sight of the commissars or the officials of 4 key points on the track, and that is the 100-metre line, the 200-metre sprint line, both pursuit lines and the finish line, so there's actually 5 points. And having a series of poles down the middle will cause some issues, I'm sure. But apart from that, it's also not conducive to TV. And Cycling New Zealand have pointed that out, that it'd be difficult to actually have a major event there because you couldn't have TV. But I don't want to actually harp on the design so much, or poles or no poles at this stage. I think we're just concentrating on the figure, the budgeted figure that we want to agree on. Then we'll talk about the design if we can get that part of it over the line. And if we can come up with something close to the 20 mil figure that is not going to have the poles, then we can discuss that later. That's, I think, where we sit, Hamish.
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Appropriate clarification.
Kia ora tātou, whetū whānau awa FM iwi radio. Our listeners are predominantly under 25 years old, and they are going to be the tax and ratepayers that will pay for whatever decision is made. The question that many of them have asked, and why I've come tonight, is how confident are the City Council and the stakeholders, and congratulations to all of Whanganui for your past great glory, but how confident are we all that we are going to be able to afford to pay for this first off, and that it's going to be used in such a way that, you know, it was a tragedy that the velodrome that we have existing closed this year. How confident are we that we're going to support this if we get it? Kia ora.
That is quite literally the $20 million question. $36 million question. I mean, that is the major question. The council has to balance. It's about affordability and particularly about usage. I think you've heard a little bit from Ian and Ron about potential usage, and I don't know if anyone else is qualified to respond. But
with regards to the payments, I understand the lady's question here. When we look at those figures on the wall, we're talking the $20 million option, we're talking $1 a week, right? Per ratepayer.
Yeah.
$1 a week.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So, the far, no, yes, yeah. I get it.
Well, I've been listening to this. I've been wondering about the Springvale Stadium, which must be close to 50 years old, and must have some maintenance issues there. So, I'm just wondering how that might fit in to the. If you have to, because it's real, people are talking about other uses, and I'm just wondering whether the stadium's coming maybe to the end of its life, or certainly in the next 10 to 15 years might be having some major maintenance issues, and therefore what impact that might have.
I think we'll ask Councillor Baker Hogan, who's been part of the sports facilities.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, the great thing about Wanganui is we've got some wonderful sporting facilities. It's a reason the New Zealand Masters Games have started here and have over 70 events. That is actually a real plus. So, you know, I guess it's a little bit with anything, how many pools, how many cycling tracks, how many athletics tracks or whatever. I think the clear, what you've heard, it's been through the trust, the RBDT, and cycling, is that there's not an intention to take competitor, give to pool. Okay, so we need, we have a growing population. We need all our facilities to be valid and to be feasible. In brief, the community sports, the Wanganui Community Sports Centre Trust that operates the Jubilee, the Springvale Stadium, and also Sport Wanganui now, who actually have the contract with the gym club. That facility is the land belongs to the council or the ratepayer, but they have done all that work and they've actually never come, huge credit, have never really in my time come to council needing ratepayer funding. Obviously they go to a lot of the community trusts and have done that. So they're engaged with what's now a fairly active sport and recreation working group. Yes, they've had regular upkeep and they'll need it, but but they can't hold cycling events in there. This cycling, I guess it's up to people to make their decisions, but this is an absolute point of difference. It was the first, it's still one of three. There's not likely to be any more, and we have a sporting history, so a strong sporting history in it.
Thanks, Philip. What I wanted to say also is that my observation, even on Sunday, I went there and there were probably 150 kids playing badminton. We were actually hosting a badminton tournament there that was actually run by the Manawatu Badminton Association, because they don't have a facility like ours. So they'd actually come over here and hosted it. So it's still pretty well utilised. Just up there on the that's right, next.
Thank you. I wonder if you can tell us what we would be left with if we went down the decommissioning route.
Yeah, look, no, I can't tell you. Essentially, we would, decommissioning, probably Leighton would be best to answer this, but would be just removing the track and then making decisions about what could go there.
Yep, that's pretty much it. So the allowance of 200k is to decommission the track. It is to retain parts of the infrastructure that are currently there, because what happens thereafter would need to be considered as part of the community. So it's a limited decommission of the track facility with existing facilities such as the cycling club-owned facilities, and all the retaining walls would be remaining, because council or the community would need to make a decision on the long-term plan for that facility if that was the decision they went for.
Thank you, Marty Hewson. I understand that the proposals that have been put forward to council over the years have undertaken peer reviews, correct?
Yes. That's Steve Bramley's
Thank you.
peer review that I mentioned. Yeah.
Is there going to be a peer review taken under on the report that council commissioned just recently? Are you going to have a peer review on your own report?
Oh, on the Bramley report?
Yes. You've done it on the others.
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessary, to be honest.
Oh, come on, Hamish.
No, seriously, the Steve
Come on. Come on.
Sorry.
You know,
No, I'm not going to have an argument here.
No,
Please. If you're talking about the proposed design that Boone has put forward, absolutely. If you're talking about a review of all the documentation over the last 25 years and all the reports that was accepted by a lot of people and stakeholders here, from the professional in New Zealand, I don't think so. But absolutely, we would naturally never progress a design like Glenn's without peer reviewing it.
I don't follow your logic that you're not going to have a review on this report over here.
Yet another report on another report on another report.
Well, you've been doing that for quite some time, Hamish.
Well, Steve, or are you happy to leave that?
How many reviews have you done?
Just happy to respond. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been involved with probably about 100 different facility projects in Australia and New Zealand, and I want to commend the tenacity of the Regional Velodrome Development Trust. 20 years, major projects are never easy to get over the line, and then you've got to relitigate them time and time again. But I often get pulled in to independent review projects, and this one's been challenging. I read about 100 different documents. And what happens over the course of 20 years, sometimes you can get reports built on reports, and when you look at base premises, they're not necessarily there. So after probably spending a week of reading the reports, I stopped and I put them to the side. And sometimes Wanganui hasn't been well served by the quality of some of those reports. Philip referenced one earlier, I won't name the specific one. But really, what I found myself doing wasn't to do a business case, but I was asked to actually comment on the validity of what I was reading. But I would not have served this community well if I just said, look, it's not stacking as it's reading. What I'm absolutely confident on is the cycling use, about 2,000 hours per year. But if you're going to achieve 2,000 hours per year, you need dynamic people like Ron, Kath Sheetley, I thought she was pretty amazing. She talked about a community activation facility, Ian, and the whole cycling club. And you've actually got to spend money on people running programs. If you just have a space and you don't have people, it doesn't work. One of the problems with the Velodrome, it is a sport-specific facility. It is not designed as an event venue. What happens around the world is then they try to find other uses to make it work. But it doesn't often actually necessarily make the net operating cost any better. It means it's more well used. So one of the things I was asked to look at, and it's always a little bit contentious, but there was quite a high event demand being stated. I didn't see the evidence for that. I've been in the events business for a long time. Events are pretty brutal in New Zealand. If you're trying to create a concert, I was in a conversation 2 to 3 months ago. An Auckland promoter was trying to work out how they lost a major concert to Forsyth Bar. Bottom line reality was Forsyth Bar bought that event for a large amount of money. So when you're trying to actually attract events, you've often got to have extra money to make them happen. Now, one of the challenges with the Velodrome, you end up with 2 things. Can I just make, again, for information, because tonight's about information. The Velodrome doesn't run any concerts. They also, their infield has a maximum egress, and that's the number of people you're allowed to legally have in there with fire designer, only 2,500 people. So they're innovating, as Ron and others have said. They're running a CrossFit champs, that's great, but they are not running a concert. If you're trying to run a concert of 5,000 people inside a Velodrome, you've got a very, very steep track. you have to build dedicated scaffolding. And that's going to cost you, reality, we've got actual quote, because it was quite hard to just guesstimate. So we actually asked the local scaffolder to actually cost it, based on Glenn and others' advice regarding what was required. That was going to cost 80k. And then 80k, plus also then you need some extra staff, and just make sure it's safe because you're moving over areas where people can slip and fall. So you end up with about an extra 100,000 cost. Now, if you've got 5,000 people, and they're each effectively paying $20 each of their concert ticket to fund scaffolding. And in a very competitive world, your margins start going, and they make choices and go elsewhere. However, having said that, if you create a space, you innovate. And what I think is the opportunity here is you've got a proud cycling history. You really make it work for cycling. The option 2 modelling, we've almost allowed that revenue earned can actually be spent on switched on programmers like Kath, actually making activities happen so it is a well-utilised facility for fitness and other spaces. Then working with Wanganui partners or whoever your best event promoters are, yes, you will be able to create some trade events, but again, you just got to watch what you don't steal from a Springvale or elsewhere, right? There's always going to be business choices and community choices. But the problem is probably, which is facing council, is always one of affordability. So I'll go back to option 2 and option 3. The reality is you end up spending about another 15, 16 million on an asset. So you end up with much higher insurance and particularly maintenance and long-term maintenance costs. You also, when you start trying to run a multi-sport facility, you end up with a need for a much bigger staffing structure, right? And so consequently, yes, you increase the income by maybe another 150, 200,000 in option 3, but you probably increase the cost by about another 300 to 400,000. And that's the dilemma. Now, as Kiwis and as Wanganui, you've had a proud sporting history and you'll innovate. So, as ratepayers, as part of your LTP process, you'll make decisions regarding what you're prepared to spend on the Velodrome, and that's your call as ratepayers. But in terms of meeting a cycling need, there could be a big debate, and we've got some talented designers here, from Barry to the work Bob's done to Glenn, and with input, specialist input from people like Ron, you might end up with 22, 23. I mean, you can sort of solve it that actually there's potentially going to be the smartest solution for the need. But all I'm saying is, if you start to then go to a bigger number, you don't get extra revenue necessarily that offsets the relative costs. So consequently, it costs you more. There will be a level of activity increase, but there won't necessarily be a massive level of activity increase. Not without, if you're trying to create concerts and you're building the scaffolding, you might be having to spend 50,000 in an event fund to get a particular concert. You've actually got to supplement often. So I just want to give that view. So I don't think you need to do another review on cycling need. I think you can achieve about 50% of what the Velodrome was achieving in 2018. Ron and I don't think we're going to differ too much on that by about plus or minus 10, 20%. Then with regard to the other activity, it's how you innovate, but use some of the revenue to employ people to program that space in the best possible way. The decision you've got to make as part of this LTP process is if you're going to the right side of the curve, that you really do want to do that, but you may get maybe another 30% increase in activity, but those net operating costs don't go away. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Stephen. I think we heard from Bob about some of the potential innovative uses, or was that from Ron? I can't remember. And if you want a peer review, put it in your submission. So, Trevor Strong. And then we'll go over here, up to the top here.
Trevor Strong, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned tonight is the government's input. We're talking about 20 million plus. Earlier on they said they're going to put 6, and we've heard other figures. Is the council still working through that area? I was in New Plymouth the other day. Yarra Stadium, 58 million been spent on it. Government put 20 million in 6 games a year.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and they're angry about it. So we've got an MP from this government. Why aren't we leveraging to get some money for this project, which is going to help New Zealand?
I can say that Steph Lewis has been a pretty ardent supporter of the Velodrome. To be honest, the council hasn't. The last lobbying I did was with the Minister of Sport just prior to the election, and when I wrote him a fairly kind of tub-thumping letter, we've had a pretty fairly, I'd say, some robust conversations with the Minister of Sport over the last 3 years. I don't think it's changed. It's still Grant Robertson. I think it's still Grant Robertson. And without being nailed down, he almost always refers it to Sports New Zealand. With it.
Could I just briefly add that really, until the council makes a decision, that's what the government, that's what external funders, actually we have to make this decision. Is it option 1, 2 or 3? When we make that and we dedicate capital funding in our 10-year plan, which is really a 3-year plan, then they're interested. Yes, there's been all this, there's been not just ideas, there's been all this work done, there's been bids, there's been shovel ready, but there hasn't actually been a council project. Much of that has been led by the RBDT over some years, and some of those reports are, with great respect to them, are their reports. So if you do ask why aren't we peer reviewing, perhaps the Pamby report, to be fair, you could ask why hasn't the Giblin report or such and such other report been peer reviewed. But until this council, that's what Steph Lewis needs to go forward. That's what the Mayor needs, that's what Anne Murphy needs, that's what the group of people need to go forward to the government and other funders. The council, the community, over the line in the 10-year plan.
Wouldn't that come to the council's decision making? If you're going to go ahead with a project this large, don't you bring that up at council to make the decision that the government are going to put some money in? You wouldn't go and say, yes, we're going to go and do it, because you haven't got the money.
No, it's the other way around, really, Trevor. I totally understand what you're doing, what you're saying, but we've got to have a project to be able to say, give us the money, and I don't think that's fair to say while I can hear you. Please.
I get involved in funding of a large number of different community projects. With the COVID situation, government changed the rules, right? And the Crown infrastructure funding suddenly occurred and a lot of people moved, and Yarra Stadium was a beneficiary of that because they were ready to go. Also, one of the issues in this, and part of my independent review, Council was only committing approximately $1 million from previous LTPs. It's too low. When you work with government, you've got to get the reasons off the table for them not to contribute. And then it's the best of Hamish and the local MPs in terms of still lobbying and advocating at government. I often do independent work, review work for Sport New Zealand, and for this type of facility, you do need in that order of 40 to 50% from a local authority. And that is part of what this proposal is submitting. But you go 2 or 3, right? It's about 45%. Now, you've still got a hard road to 5, but also, as you consider over this next couple of months what you want to do as a community, I also think you've got one of your best opportunities to move in the next 12 months. Because there's windows in time, just like there was a national Velodrome tender last year with COVID, and I think there's probably a relatively sympathetic environment in the next 12 months, but if you do not have clarity on this project with a fair level of commitment, which is the kind of level of commitment which Council is proposing, you will not get over the start line. So I think you're well placed with those kind of ratios.
Well, that's what I mean about a project, funded project from Council, right? Not that there's a design. So Ron and then Rob. Okay.
Yeah, just picking up on, I think what you said, Hamish, and like Steve knows more about this than anybody else in the room about the proper procedure going through government. Government term will just go to Sport New Zealand, knock on their door and say, what do you think of this Velodrome Whanganui? I've just got a quote here that I wrote down before I came tonight. This is from Pete Muskeman, who was the retired CEO of Sport New Zealand. Now we have a different person, of course, in Radian Castle. But his words in an email to me was, Sport New Zealand continues to hold the view that an appropriate solution is required to maintain what is a significant sporting asset for both Whanganui and the wider region, but we have to stop receiving mixed messages.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So Rob, and then we'll go behind you, and then we'll go over there to Steve, and there. So we've got these four. Anyone else? And Jay, and we'll see how we go because we're getting tight to time. Not to suggest that you can't keep on conversing after I've gone.
Thank you, Hamish. We've had a lot of talk about the top line up here. What we're really concerned about with this 10-year plan is the bottom line. That's the cost to the ratepayer. And what we're looking at up here is 42,000, 1,020,000, or 1,741,000. The council will look, like it does to all sports, for some sort of user pays input into this. So I'd like to ask the cycling representatives who are here tonight to give us some indication, some comfort of what they feel they could contribute to the 1,020,000 in option 2.
I don't know if Ian's still here, but I just want to acknowledge that Ian. Okay, I just want to acknowledge, Rob, that Ian Murphy has said about the gifting of the Snow Pavilion as one contribution. Is there anyone else who wants to answer that? Ron?
I can answer it, yeah. I think our cycling's contribution is pretty significant when we're going to hand over a building that's probably worth, nearly $500,000 and possibly gifting that to the city. That's a hell of a contribution. But apart from that, the cyclists alone will continue to pay because they will pay for the usage of the track, just like they do in Invercargill, just like they do in Cambridge, just like they do in every velodrome around the world. They will pay. If Cycling New Zealand run their regional hub program here in Whanganui, which would be fantastic, Cycling New Zealand will pay. And that's how cycling will contribute.
Maybe we can ask him when he gets back up there, and then across and then down.
I think the sad thing is that we've heard two speakers tonight say that there's a 2B, and yet there's no 2B on the wall. We've had a councillor ask us how much cycling is going to contribute. We've heard that there are 30 other groups that would use this event. They have not been able to air how much they would contribute. The Sergeant's Gallery doesn't make a profit. Splash Centre doesn't make a profit, yet it fills a very big community service. You know, when the Velodrome was first made, I believe it was going to cost $4 million to roof it. I would wager that you guys have blown at least that amount of capital on reports that really all they've done is fueled a no answer.
Well, we haven't spent $4 million on reports, I can tell you. I know, we'll find that out later, but thank you. That wasn't a question there. I agree that 2B option perhaps should be there, but as an option. But again, we made a decision on what we had before us. And that's why the submission process is extremely important. Because if it's not in front of us, we can't invent it. I'm sorry, no, I'm not having that. The process was already as a point along the train. The 10-year plan process is very strict in time. We have to have a budget on June the 30th, otherwise we can't rate on July the 1st. We did, I'm sorry, we did do that. As Bob mentioned, we had a workshop in, September was it? October. We had another workshop. We have communicated quite extensively with the RBD team.
So why is it
their option up there?
Because their option was the larger option at that point in time. I'm sorry, that wasn't it? Well, it was. Sorry, Councillor Baker Hogan, who has had more relationship with the RBDT, she says it was. Yes. It's not our intention to screw you, Bob, in any way, shape or form. We're wanting to work with you to get a sustainable option, and most importantly, we want to hear your submissions. I didn't? Oh. Pat?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Again, respectful communication is good. Let's go.
What I really want to know is, has any of the council actually been to Cambridge, had a look at how it runs, and see what's involved in the costs and everything else? Because Cambridge is used, and they didn't have a track, didn't even have a cycling club. And now they've got one of the top clubs, tracks and everything in the world there. And has the council, any of the councillors been and had a look and see actually what happens, how it works, and what's the costs involved?
Yeah, I've been there, but I didn't ask extensively. But Steve Bramley did the report and is well positioned to answer that question.
As Ron described, the Velodrome has grown activity levels since it's opened, and has expanded again since we had a hard look at the numbers 2017-18. The operating costs are very, very high, and I think, but in terms of their cost recovery, they've got what is quite unique in that situation. They have a very, very, very high level of annual sponsorship, which will probably shift going forward. They are achieving a marginal facility which is probably not necessarily going to be able to be sustained at those levels once some of those sponsorship levels maybe aren't continued. What they are achieving is a good level of cycling use. Now, Ian made the comment before, if you take the raw numbers at the moment, 70 cycling club members, it's not what we're assessing against. We're assessing against all the input that we've seen, overlaying it against the Velodrome, making realistic assessments regarding what events we will get, what we won't get, what levels of activity with programming that we could achieve. And Global Leisure did it one way second time round. They got it wrong first time round. I fundamentally agreed with their assessment second time around when they did a bottom-up assessment. I did it a different way on a ratio basis. I came away confident that we could achieve about half that Velodrome level. But that requires a lot of energy and effort to go from what your current base is to a really vibrant facility that is used 2,000 hours a year. So when you talk 2,000 hours, you're fundamentally talking 40 hours a week of activity. And so you've really got to drive that, and to just have a space and think spontaneous casual activity will achieve that is not the case. You need active programming, running a full range of different activity options, whether it's for schools, whether it's for people with disabilities, whether it's for fitness riders, whether it's fitness circuits, whether it's aspiring cyclists, development, or at a higher level. So very much based off what a Velodrome could achieve from a cycling perspective, and that is the key thing, probably from my responsibility to council and to the community, that there is a valid cycling use that you can achieve but it will require very, very good ongoing programming. And those numbers actually allow for that. So I hope that helps.
Stephen Brandon from Wanganui Community Foundation. Okay. The Wanganui Community Foundation has pledged $500,000 towards this project, and it was on the basis of what was shown to us, which was perhaps closer to option 3 in terms of some of the scope. However, the major reason why we pledged money towards this is because of the community impact that it would have. And in particular, all the additional uses that it can be put to and would be put to contributed a lot. It probably could contribute as much to our decision as did the pure performance cycling, not even high performance cycling, just the general cycling use. I wonder, with option 2, if it does not include levelling the floor, and if it is likely to include beams or posts, how much will that affect other community users? And I think particularly the flooring from what I hear tonight. If that flooring is not level, how much does that affect our potential community users?
I don't know who's best to answer this. Edel, Steve, Stephen again, just being aware that I have to go in a couple of minutes, so we'll have one more question after this, and then that won't.
So there's already been described a number of times to not take that activity from other venues in the area, and so in terms of the court sports side of it, not such an issue. In terms of the layout of the posts, there's two options that currently sit on the table. What's currently presented in the documents has posts down the centre of the infield area, but there's another layout which is the same as the Southland Velodrome, which has 4 posts on the inside edge of the safety zone of the track. So there is another possibility there, but again, that's design detail. It's not that can be dealt with later. So it's about the sort of uses that could actually go into the infield area and what would actually require a flat floor. The question is really back to the community in terms of what those real uses could be and whether they actually require that levelled floor, because that does come at a cost.
It's a good question, and one of the challenges, if you're trying to provide fundamentally a cycling and fitness facility, that's what option 2 is going to achieve. You then potentially try to make a decision as a community, what other uses do you actually want to try to drive in there? Now, repeatedly, and I've heard again tonight, and I heard during the review process, the community did not want to consider a court sport option. When you look at several velodromes around the world, and Invercargill is probably our closest example, they have court sport activity in the middle. And the court sport actually works quite complementary to cycling, but at the moment that decision was not made based on how it was premised in terms of arriving at this point. And then if you do have court sports, then you do need a level floor. If you've then got an intent, you're trying to drive more trade shows and other activities, then that could be an issue that you actually do then actually want to start to put on the table in terms of that level floor. And that could be part of your submission process, which again, you can have almost a myriad of options. And there might be that we do want to achieve a flat floor to really try to optimise use, but I'd also suggest to you, often if you are trying to do that, you'd be driving a level of court sport activity into that space. Right? And that's actually a very good use of a velodrome if you have an adequate capacity.
Thank you.
Hello.
My
name is Alan Luff. We'd just like to confirm this community guys touching on the community involvement. And this lady's here is concerned about the youth, and Rob Vincent's concerned about the ongoing costs. Now, if anybody's involved with a sporting club, they will fully understand that they're there, their primary purpose is to make good citizens. Okay? Now, to anybody who is concerned about nobody, that is priceless in a community's ongoing future.
Thank you very much. Look, I know there's still some questions, and I don't want to kind of cut short because I have to go, but I do have to go. I'd like to invite Councillor Baker-Hogan to be the first 5 for any further questions, just for the next 15 minutes. I want to say thank you for the most part, respectful. Sorry, I almost lost a little bit over here. I apologise for that. Please, this is not submissions. Please make your submissions to us so we can examine your submissions written down and respond and ask questions and then bring them all together to make our decisions on priorities. So please do that. Don't regard this as part of the submissions process. It's an information process. So I'll pass it on to Councillor Baker Hogan. Thank you for your flexibility, and we'll close up in 15 minutes. It always makes a difference. Always. I'm not talking about the Velodrome. In fact, we put $1 million into the Velodrome 4 years ago. It always makes a difference when you put a submission in. I can tell you that. And, as I said earlier, this is not unanimous, that this was our preferred option. There are councillors who voted not to make that the preferred option. So this is not a slam dunk by any means. Thank you.
Further questions? There's somebody up in the right-hand corner, thank you. And is there anyone else next after that? Marty again. And Ross. Next. So 3 in a row. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And
probably not know because of my age. But my question is, what is the point of this velodrome? Like, why don't we just keep Cook's Gardens as it is? If it needs repairing, we give it repairing. There's something nice about it being out in the open, in the sunshine, say when this goes to athletics. That's my question. And also the rates of building it, it goes up. And I know people personally who may not be able to keep up with those rates on their houses and other stuff. So how are you going to deal with that?
So look, I guess the quick question is, this is about consulting, talking about what we're looking at, talking about some key projects. This is one of them. There's 3 options here, and we welcome your submission. But what we're clear about in regard to why we haven't got an option there just to replace the track is that the cycling, that when this wooden velodrome was built, it was always the intention to roof it, and it is every advice we have got from the cycling community is that there's basically no point in just doing what we've done and ending up with a track that at the moment is closed 20, 30 years down the track. And a little bit of dew, a tiny bit of rain, events can't happen. But please put your submission in, and that it will be answered. We're next with Marty.
Thank you, Philippa. I wrote a letter to the paper, which I believe you must have read because you responded to it. I'm really lost for words how a community asset can end up in the state that it's in. And it's a shame Hamish is not here because I think you've represented the citizens of Wanganui very poorly over this. And I think that needs to be acknowledged because it raises a very interesting question in my mind. How much confidence do you think the community has in you if that's the way you're going to look after community assets?
I'm not sure if it's a valid point. It's your view. It's probably a view that could be largely held. I look at myself first because I'm involved with this project for many years. I have been involved in leading the cycling centre a bit with the council. That was and there's been some time since then since we've put in that I guess a huge commitment. This is in regard to, we have put money in the plan as we've been asked. We've only ever been asked by the Regional Velodrome Development Trust or to even put $1 million in there. Lee would remember I've questioned him at those times and said that I don't think that's enough. And like I'd say that the Regional Velodrome Development Trust, possibly because frustrated by council, I can't speak for them, but they led this project, for many years. I think I would suggest at times left hand and right hand haven't been working as well as they could be. But at the end of the day, to get a major project over the line is always big and always complex. And when we let a bid and we were 6 out of 7 rated, fairly or unfairly, by Sport New Zealand or the government at the time. It probably part of that was saying how difficult it was ever going to be to roof a velodrome. Of course, costs have gone up, but that's all I can really say at the moment. Did you want to answer some of that, Ron?
No, basically, I just want to say, whereabouts in the 10-year plan, bear in mind that this velodrome's been the previous 10-year plan, and nothing happened. So now we're in another 10-year plan. I want to know where it's going to sit in that 10-year plan, because what's happened, because we've been patching and repairing the velodrome for a number of years, we're really, really in danger of the trusses getting to the point where they will deteriorate so much that's going to cost a hell of a lot more than the figures we see out there today. We have to make sure that we get this new track down and covered before the trusses actually rot. So I don't want to see it sit in year 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. This has to happen. This has to be a priority. If we can get the 20 plus over the line with the option 2, then the council have to really elevate it to the top of that 10-year plan if they're going to save themselves a lot of money and we're going to safeguard the velodrome. It's really, really important. I can tell you that, look, talking with the carpenter over there, the regular carpenter, you know, we've got to protect those trusses as soon as possible.
Thank you, and brief reply, because it's sitting as, well, it's down as the #1 project, I guess, sitting in the frontier of the 10-year plan. It's got #1 on it, so hopefully that gives some indication of its importance. The preferred option at this stage of the 20 million roof velodrome anticipates construction could commence in 2023-4. So we're currently in the 2020-21 council year. We're going into, this plan's about, it's a 10-year plan, but it's actually a 3-year plan because we do it every year. So we're going into the 2021-2. So that would say it's talking about possibly 2 years down. Really what that's about is once council, in my view, hopefully supports roofing a velodrome, whatever option, it's about that team leading that project very clearly to funders, to government, etc. And the sooner the funds can be pulled in and promised, the sooner it can begin, and obviously the detailed design work. So, that's an estimate. I think that's how we've said that. I think we had Ross, and then we had Lee, and then Ian.
Thank you, Philippa. I'm going to generalise. Most Whanganui aren't comfortable with making in-person or written submissions to council, and that's the process you've laid out. Most of those who probably will make cogent submissions in person or in writing will be people who have the in-depth knowledge, as opposed to aesthetic statements or wishful thinking. I've noticed that there's at least 2 councillors on Facebook tonight. I don't know how they voted, but I can tell by their commentary that they voted for option 1 because they put up their concerns on Facebook. And that's a fair call. That's a fair call. I'm an outsider. I'm confident enough to make a submission, but I don't have the in-depth knowledge and information that the councillors have had access to over some time. So what would it take for somebody, Joe Bloggs, to be able to provide sufficient information other than passion to turn their view around when they don't have the information? So what I have here, and I'm finishing on this, page 16 is council's reasons why they support option 2 and not option 3. So if you go to page 16, if by some chance those people who are making submissions, be they velodrome or just general members of the public, are able to address those dot points, would those councillors, and we don't know, but would those councillors have a preparedness to change their minds? Because that seems to me, if those are your 5 points why we can't have option 3, then it behooves all of us to have a go at those 5 points. I don't have the knowledge and the documents to debate those points, and I think that puts us all at a disadvantage when we appear in front of council, and that's a pity.
Just probably 2 things. My clear understanding, Leighton, is that my report is accessible online.
It's one of the supporting documents. There's about 4 or 5 supporting documents, so there's a lot of detailed documentation which is attached as supporting documentation to the flyer you've got.
But that's not who most of us are, Leighton.
Yeah, we're just saying it is there.
It's available.
And the other suggestion I'd make, just hearing that feedback, is I think supplementary sheets could be quite easily written. Often with these documents, you've got half a paragraph to try to get across a whole lot of different projects. We have a large amount of information now, so I think it's a valid point, and Philippa, I think it could actually be quite easily responded to in terms of having a supplementary sheet on each of those options.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley.
We'll go forward to Council Mayor, and it seems
Take that on board.
I will take that on board. I will take it on board. Thank you. We now have Lee and Josh. Yes. Oh, Lee Grant.
Thank you, Philippa. Lee Grant, RVTT. Oh, it's now too long. Just a couple of points I'd like to make is 36.4 million. Where did that come from? Because we came in at 29, I think. Bob, is that correct? The other thing I'd like to make is somebody mentioned about referendums and things. It was you, Mike. We've had two referendums already and one Horizons research poll done. 2 referendums said that they wanted the Velodrome done. This is going back a few years, 2005 and another one in 2008. The 2005 one said, and I note, that the polling was for the Velodrome first, and the second one was the art gallery. We're still waiting for the Velodrome. And 2008 was another one, and that came through with the Velodrome coming out tops as well. We also had a research done by Horizons Research in July 2020, and it was 83% voting to proceed with the roofing of the Velodrome. Now, the other point I'd like to make is that we've done a hell of a lot of work on this, 7 years of my life, and we've done a lot of research and a lot of talking to a hell of a lot of people. There is not one velodrome in the world that makes money in cycling alone. You have to have a and you'll pick this up as well, Steve, you have to have the multi-purpose aspect of it. And to get that, we need people like the rugby, like athletics, like all these other sports that can make use of it. The skating as well. I mean, they bring in big numbers. And to make it pay for itself, we need those big numbers. It won't be free to go. You'll have to pay to get in, not like the Sergeant. So it's not going to be too much of a burden, we hope, on the ratepayers. Thank you very much.
So I'm going to let Jen answer part of that, but I'm just going to answer 2 or 3 things quickly. The yes to referendums, 2005, 2008. Council put $14.3 million in 2011 into leading the Cycling Centre of Excellence project for the national bid. And so Council listened to the referendum and Council did something. Unfortunately, Council wasn't successful in that bid, and so then it got no government other funding. That's that. And the Horizons research was researched. I think that you're involved with, Lee. Yeah. Leave it at that.
Yeah, so just a brief summary on how numbers were arrived at. So Rawlinson's quantity surveyors, so our national company, were brought in to review the trust's figures, and there was the workshop that's been described that was carried out with multiple sort of consultant parties, was the chance for the 2 quantity surveyors to actually put their numbers together and try to figure out where they met and where they departed. The figure that Rawlinson's finally settled on for the full scheme was that 36 million. There was probably an argument to the degree of about 3 million for that full scheme. And as you've also heard today, there was a lesser version that was put forward that was sitting at about 29 or 30 million. And again, that sort of 2 to 3 million argument between the QSs sat within those. So in terms of professional disagreements, if you like. So, you know, if you apply the materiality to it, it was quite minor in terms of the magnitude of those numbers. So that's how those figures were arrived at. So they've had multiple QSs looking at it, and there is some room for agreement between biggers, but it's only within probably 3 million on the higher amount.
Thank you. And can I be clear? I want to be really clear here, because we hear about other options, and other options can come forward and may have come forward at various times. But the Regional Velodrome Development Trust preferred option was the multi-purpose velodrome. It's their preferred option. It was the shovel-ready project that they put to council, that council put forward to the government. It's the project that you've read about in the paper over quite a period of time around the election. That is that preferred option. All that stuff is what got independently reviewed with that, along with a whole lot of other documentation over time. And then council had workshops to go, where do we go for our 10-year plan? And it made, and it had, so much stuff, and you'll now, there's a level of getting so confused, and absolutely fair enough. And we could have maybe put out 10 options or something. Council in the end has to make the decision. You vote us on, and you can vote us off again. And we have to make a decision in May about these 3 or other submissions you put that we'll have to consider. But that was the preferred option. But council made the decision around with looking at it with the independent review of and going forward what could be, if you're looking at other affordable options. So and the trust definitely came forward after they got those documents prior to the public, and then they've come forward with, I think, a good 2-pager on what they now think could be viable, and I imagine that's what I think they've said their submission will be, so that will be considered. But I think, I'm really clear, I'm a supporter of all the cycling, so many, the sporting community, and I absolutely endorse all the work being done, but you've also got to be a little bit fair to council at the end of the day, and submissions need to come through. Yes, and there is...
the shovel-ready project 26 million, not 36?
No, it was not.
Where did the figure of 26 million
come from, I think, the Regional Velodrome Development Trust, and it will be their submission, but we're not going to go there now.
Why not? Why not?
Because it hasn't been their preferred case. It's not what they put forward to shovel ready to us to put forward to government.
How can people submit on something that's not their fault? It's got to be there.
No, because
these people have put their heart and soul into this. Velodrome and perhaps watch international netball or something like that, which we're never going to have in the Jubilee Stadium, is a flawed plan.
Look, Gary, all I can answer you, at the end of the day, any big project, if they're doing it, has to be independently reviewed. And we've done that. Now, whether the community accepts our independent reviewer, that's your call. But we have to consider this proposal, that proposal, and we have to make a call on ourselves. Now, if you want to be at council, please put your hand up. Please do that. But we've had to make our call, whether it's right, you think it's right or wrong. Submit, and you'll hear the RBDT's submission as well. I'm sure it will be in the public arena.
Philippa, can I just ask a question before we all go home? And this is a question for Steve, which is practical. Steve, option 2 leaves a gap of $11 million that has to come from somewhere. Option 3 leaves a gap of $20 million. What is the feasibility of getting that money, given that there's been a comment that we need to roof this thing tomorrow?
Probably the smaller the gap, the more real it is. With the option 2, you're not asking central government to rewrite the books. So when you look at available funds like the Lottery Significant Projects Fund, Lottery Community Facilities Fund, they almost have what I call understood maximums. For example, Lottery Significant Projects Fund, you might get to possibly $4.5 million. and you've really almost then got to have a special government fund, like what happened last year. The Crown Infrastructure Fund came out of nowhere, almost kicking in. Now, there's no such fund at the moment that exists in 2021. There might be. As per my earlier comment, I think your best window to optimise central government funding will definitely be in the next 18 months. So, as a community, once you work through exactly what you are going for, I would strongly be recommending that you have a clear, united proposition come middle of this year with a council contribution of about 45%, because otherwise you cannot play that central government game. And I don't think your best window is in the next 18 months.
Steve. Now, Josh, did you?
Oh, no, I was just going to clarify Ross's question, but I couldn't do it now.
It is 7:36, Trevor, but we can go a few more minutes.
Just one question that I'd like to challenge the council on. Let me do that. At your council meetings, when you're discussing the Velodrome, one thing I think you should look at is, do we want international sport in this town? And look at it, what sports can give you international sport. And I think this is the only way that we will get true international sport to what we're doing. And it should be something that's taken quite seriously. We get one chance. If we don't get it, it'll go somewhere else. So, you know, that's the way I would look at it, as from a citizen as well.
Thank you, Chair. And just to be, can we get,
if the councillors think this project's going to go ahead, why, I would suggest they spend the 200k temporarily covering the track now so it doesn't deteriorate anymore. You know, I don't know, you'd have to look into it like the plastic they use, like you've got around the Opera House, you know. If we want to save this asset, it needs to be covered now, even if the track's covered, so, well, it can't be used, but it needs to be covered now. Otherwise, we're going to lose it. We're going to wait 3 years. You know, this thing's got to be covered. It's an asset that's got to be looked after.
That's been heard, and I'll take that one through as well. And Gary from Speed Skating.
I have a question for Steve. All of the reports that you went through, you would have come across reports that told you how much speed skating events, how much local usage for training, how many local competitions, regional competitions, national competitions and international competitions. It would also have in those reports how we'd take absolutely nothing off Jubilee Stadium. We'd be using Jubilee Stadium exactly the same amount as we are, which is very, very regularly. And our club has about 250 odd members and they're all volunteers, so there's no ongoing increase in operational costs. My question to you is, if people seek your report online, will they be able to read all those figures?
With the speed skating, it wasn't validated in any of the reports. There were statements made. I was asked to review what I read. If I was doing comparison in cycling, one of the problems that occurred with this project right the way through was and Sport New Zealand picked this up in their peer review when they did it about 2 to 3 years ago, there had been no full demand analysis done. Now, Global Leisure was then commissioned by Sport New Zealand to do it, and they came up short. And that was then picked up, both by my report and also, more importantly, prior to that, by Ron and Ian and others, that actually needed to be addressed because they hadn't considered particularly the wider catchment of Palmerston North and the impacts, nor had they looked at several other activities. And really those numbers eventually were corrected. But there was no detailed information clearly specifying that use of speed skating that was validated. So in my review, I said that. I didn't the demand wasn't validated, and for a project of this nature, if you're going to have a speed skating track, it needs to be fully documented.
That answers your question, Gary? Final question.
Is confirmation from the Skate NZ and Skate Australia, is that not validation? Because that was all in the reports.
There was generic bulk numbers given, but in terms of that activity had been personally validated by anyone along the tracks, no, it wasn't actually documented clearly at any stage. And it doesn't meet Sport New Zealand requirements in the way it had been documented.
Okay. Thank you very, very much for all your time, everybody. Submissions close 5 p.m. on the 30th of April. Please talk to your networks. Like I said, one sentence submission is absolutely fine, and speaking to a one sentence submission. Thank you very, very much for your time.